right, welcome in, guys. Today I am joined by the famous Coach Mike Rooney. You might remember him from his time on Squeeze Play from the tournament last year. And you see him on the D1 Baseball podcast, and he's all over the place talking everything college baseball. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
You got it, Alex. Yeah, my pleasure.
So we're going to jump into it. So we're at the halfway point of the season. What's been kind of your biggest surprise across the sport this season? What's kind of the thing that shocked you the most?
I would say, I'd say, let me start with, hey, I'm a little surprised at how well the pitch timer has gone. It's gone awesome. I came in kicking and screaming. It's not that I was against a pitch timer. When there are men on base, it makes me nervous. I thought like a very aggressive pitch timer with no one on base might be a good answer. But all that said, it's been, I don't know how you could look at the pitch timer and not say it's been good for the game. I think the other surprise is that if you looked at this week's top 10 in almost any poll, it almost looks like an April Fool's poll, right? Like it's, Wake Forest we knew was talented, but they've been so consistently good, and they've dealt with some injuries, which is crazy. Kentucky and Boston College easily in your top 10. South Carolina ranked number 6 for us, and then you're feeling like, man, are we light on South Carolina? So I would say that part's been very interesting to see some of the upstarts that maybe we didn't see coming.
Yeah, kind of along that same idea, what's going on in the Pac-12? I mean, you got Stanford, Arizona State, and USC leading the conference. I mean, it's like a blast from the past. Are we in the late 90s again?
Yeah, we are at this interesting scenario with some of these historic powers where, I feel like some of these, Miami's having a really nice year, but you think about Florida State and Clemson they're rebuilding, just flat out rebuilding. But I think I know they've both got the right coaches. Eric Bakich at Clemson was a home run. Link Jarrett at Florida State was a home run. USC hiring Andy Stankiewicz was a home run hire. And so you asked about the Pac-12. I would tell you Stanford's the best. It's the most talented roster out west. Not close. Like there's not a close second. But they don't throw great strikes. Stanford is not a great strike throwing team, and they have been a little while. They've just been not super consistent on the mound. Stanford will be there in the end, but USC did beat them in that series to open conference play. UCLA has been really banged up. I think they will be there in the end. UCLA's got a really good team. They're just not healthy right now. And then the entire rest of the league, Alex, you could just throw in a hat and pick a name. I mean, there's not a bad team in the league. The team that's playing the worst is Arizona. They've got plenty of talent. They could go on a run. So I think the Pac-12 is going to be really fun because it's really a jumbled mess right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of good teams. I was really high on UCLA coming into the season, and you're right, they have been snake bit a little bit by the injury bug. But when you talk about a jumbled mess, I mean, the Big 12 has been a total jumbled mess. I mean, every week you look that there's someone else leading the conference. Who are you looking to separate themselves from the league down the stretch?
Yeah, I would say, the Big 12 is interesting. Like literally every team in the league had to replace their rotation. Like the changeover in pitching in the Big 12 this year, you just had to know it was going to be kind of a wild ride. Oklahoma State is probably the roster I like the most, but they're also the team I've been kind of afraid to fall in love with. I just feel like I get excited about Oklahoma State and then they trip and fall a little bit. I think they'll be there in the end. Rock Riggio is one of my very favorite players nationally, and I don't think he's going to let them not get to Omaha this year. Maybe my favorite team in that league is West Virginia. I think West Virginia is very plucky. I think they're a postseason team. It would not shock me if they just kind of out of nowhere won the actual regular season. Texas is playing really well right now. Texas Tech is young, but that they're just so consistent. TCU is a little banged up. I don't know. That league's going to be really fun too. But if you made me make a bet, I'd bet on Oklahoma State. But the team I've enjoyed the most is West Virginia.
Nice. We were kind of talking about this before we hit record, but Wake Forest seems to be the class of the ACC this year. Is there anyone that you think could challenge them and maybe wrestle the league away from them?
Yeah, no, I don't think there is. It's crazy. It's like in the beginning of the season, as you know, like when you were assessing the ACC, you had to pick between Louisville and Wake. Like that's what we thought you had to do. And then
Mhm.
maybe Virginia's kind of the next tier by themselves. It turns out Miami is very, very good, in my opinion, but Wake handled them. I mean, Wake swept them
Mhm.
and in some different types of games. Wake Forest just checks every box. The scary thing is they're not even healthy yet. But they've got older position players. They've this is the best defensive team Wake Forest has had in a long time. So they still have all that power, but now they're defending and they're starting pitching. Sean Sullivan and Josh Hartle and Rhett Lauder. That rotation matches up with anybody just for consistency. And they've got really defined roles in their bullpen. They know they're giving the ball to Cam Manassi in the ninth inning. So they really just check every box. They can win every type of game. Now, that said, in the midweek game this week, Nick Kurtz has a leg injury from a base running play, and that's a real concern. Like they cannot lose him. He's as good a player as there is in America. So fingers crossed on the Nick Kurtz situation. But yeah, Wake Forest is really good.
And, the SEC seems really separate themselves from really the rest of college baseball. What is it that allows the SEC to be so consistently dominant?
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas fans cringe every time I say this, but your point is well taken, Alex, that we are, if they catch that pop up, which I don't think was an easy play, but if they make that play in 2018, we're looking at a world where we've got 5 straight SEC national champions in baseball, 5 different schools, and none of them are Tennessee and LSU. I mean, think about how crazy that is. But it speaks to your question, which, I think the SEC, it's everything, right? It's the best fan bases in the country. It's the best facilities in the country. The SEC network, my friend, all of our friends, Tom Hart, the broadcaster for the SEC network, I think he brilliantly said that the SEC network is the national network for college baseball. And so you've got the network, you've got the fan bases, you got the facilities, obviously the weather, and it has become the league that every kid wants to play in. Now, we'll always have some parity because, the SEC, LSU can only put 9 players on the field, right? They can only pitch so many guys, and kids want to play. But it's just I think the thing about the SEC is they love college baseball. They're invested in college baseball and it checks every box. They're everything that you'd want in a college baseball experience. The SEC has for you.
Yeah, and sticking with the SEC, LSU came into this season with more hype than there's been in Baton Rouge in a long time, and so far they've lived up to the hype. Kind of what has impressed you most about LSU?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny when LSU hired Jay Johnson. I think a lot of us, air quotes, experts thought, man, that's an interesting fit, right? Like this is a West Coast dude, who, is he going to fit at LSU? But the thing that I've learned is that the LSU fan base loves college baseball, always has. The LSU fan base is the OG of college baseball fan bases. It goes back to the Skip Bertman era where LSU fans were going to Omaha regardless of whether LSU was going. Like they were just going to Omaha. Now, of course, LSU was going most years, but Jay Johnson loves college baseball the same way that the LSU fan base loves college baseball. And the thing I'd tell you about LSU is where the roster is strong, it's so overwhelmingly strong that they're just bludgeoning teams this year. And right, if the draft was today, I think Dylan Cruz is going first and Paul Skeens is going second. We've never had that in college baseball. In 2011, UCLA had Garrett Cole and Trevor Bauer go first and third, but that's 2 pitchers. We've never had it go 1-2 and it be a hitter and a position and a pitcher. So I just, like as you and I are talking, I'm getting absolutely roasted on Twitter because I've been nitpicking at LSU because I think that's what you do with the number 1 team is you nitpick them and you kind of say, hey, if they're going to lose, what does it look like? How is it? Because they haven't lost yet, right? Like LSU hasn't lost a weekend yet. So if they were to lose, what would it look like? And, like the uncertainty in the bullpen, even though it's been good, that concerns me. The Sunday starter, that concerns me, especially at this point in the season. But that said, where, the infield defense is interesting to me. Now, of course, Jay Johnson can always just move Trey Morgan to first base, and now you've got the best defensive first baseman in the country playing first. So he's got a lot of options there. all that said, what impresses me about LSU is the talent on this roster is overwhelming. There's so much talent on this roster. It's almost jarring.
Yeah, my next question was going to be about concerns, but you kind of already touched on it there. Yeah, that third starter definitely needs to get nailed down if they want to make a deep run.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
what if they play one of those like crazy, like I think if you're LSU, what you have to prepare yourself for is what if 2021 NC State shows up? What if 2022 Notre Dame shows up? Like these older, skilled, good teams who aren't going to be overwhelmed by the environment. Remember, the Notre Dame kids weren't overwhelmed by Knoxville because they were at Starkville the year before, right? Like they've been there, like the older players been there, done that. There's nothing like playing at the box, but still the older college baseball players been in some good environments. So, what does this look like for, if I'm LSU, I'm planning for all contingencies. And it's like, what if one of those really hot, skilled teams shows up? And then, and then hey, you were there when we watched Iowa beat LSU, and they did
Mhm.
pressure, like Brady Neal is a freshman. He's a good player. He's a freshman. Jared Jones is a star. He's also a freshman. Gavin Dugas has not played much infield, even though, on Twitter they're saying he came in as an infielder. That's fine. He's been an outfielder at LSU as far as I can tell. So what if a team can try to take advantage of some of those things? Again, I'm nitpicking, like crazy right now. They're so good, and they're going to be at home all the way to Omaha.
Mhm. Are there any teams that people aren't really talking about much, that you've got your eye on that you think are poised to make a big run the second half of the season?
I would say in the ACC, NC State and Miami aren't as famous as Virginia and Louisville, but I think I might like them better a little bit. Virginia's got an injury on the mound that they just didn't look great last weekend. I mentioned West Virginia in the Pac-12. I just think that's going to be really fun to see how that all plays out. I mean, Iowa, I mean, people were talking about them early because they beat LSU. They've got some pretty intimidating pitching. I like their style of play, position player wise. Northeastern is like 22-4, and they've got some NCAA tournament experience. That's a really neat team that, is kind of this northern team. UConn is probably not getting enough hype. And, remember, UConn was a win away from Omaha last year. They
Mhm.
nearly took out Stanford. So, there's kind of like these fun stories across the country there. UC Santa Barbara is kind of just doing their thing on the West Coast. They're very, very good again. They're a neat team. They've led the Big West in home runs and stolen bases 3 straight years. And that's kind of hard to do. You kind of usually have to pick a lane, right? Are you going to run or are you going to hit for power? And they're doing both. So those are some ones that are top of mind for me, Alex.
So what are some of the players that have impressed you most this season?
Well, yeah, I mean, Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens certainly have your attention, right? I mean, we've we've just not seen anything like this. Like Skeens is getting the Mark Pryor, Steven Strasburg comps, and he deserves them. The Andy Bennis comp is top of mind for me because he's such a monstrous human. But what a special kid and what a special talent. And you know, you think about the demands that are placed on kids that are Air Force cadets. And then, Paul Skeens now doesn't have those demands. And you could see how the baseball has just exploded for him. And, Dylan Cruz, I just say this to people all the time, like, hey, Alex, what if in your job, I said to you, if you're really good for the next 4 months, I'll give you $9 million. Think about the pressure that would put on you in your job. And that's what Dylan Cruz is doing. Like he's playing for $9 million and he's dominating. I mean, just the quality of his play is outrageous. He's very gifted, but he's so skilled. He's such a good player. So those are two names that jump out. Nick Kurtz, we mentioned at Wake Forest, is really interesting. There's a kid, Nolan Shanuel at Florida Atlantic. We always get players like this in college baseball. We're just a really talented left-handed hitter who's just dominated college baseball at FAU for 3 years. Braden Montgomery is one of my favorites out at Stanford, two-way player. Obviously, how can you talk about players without mentioning the Jack Wagon, Jack Caglione, So yeah, I mean, as Brody Brecht hit 104 miles an hour the other day and just announced he quit. He's not going to do football anymore. Thank goodness. So yeah, there's some really fun player stories all over the country.
So, one of the things that's kind of been a talking point, here halfway through the season is how home runs have been way up across the sport. What do you think is causing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when stuff like that happens, it's almost never one thing. It's always like a bunch of things rolled together. It's hard to the bats and the balls feel like they're a little revved up. I've heard people whisper that, hey, the kids are better at messing around with their bats than we are at catching them doing it, and that wouldn't shock me. I think there's something definitely going on with the baseballs over the last couple years. I mean, the ball is really live. Um, some people have said that now that we're evaluating umpires electronically through TrackMan, umpires are more hesitant to call strikes more generously. The data is not really showing that, but I think it's a fair narrative. I will say this though, Alex, like if we're going to have this kind of offense, but we're also going to play the games as quickly as we've played them so far, I'm actually okay with it. Now, it's been cold, so as the weather gets warm, I think we have to keep our eyes open to see what it looks like. But, explosive offense is kind of part of the DNA of college baseball. It's kind of what makes us different. But if we can do that in a more expedient manner, I think I'm in for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think college baseball is in a good spot with enough offense and enough really good pitching, and it just makes everything more exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, you're never out of a game. That's the fun part. I mean, that Stillwater regional last year was kind of ridiculous, but it was awesome also. And so it's like you're never with this much offense, you're never out of a game. And again, none of us want to go back to playing 4-hour games, but if we can have that level of excitement in 3 hours or less, heck yeah, I'm in on that.
Yeah, for sure. And wanted to be respectful of your time, so I think that's all we got for you right now. And I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, good catching up with you. Appreciate it.